Well, thank you very much for joining us for yet another Tuesday on this beautiful app program developing a national human capital policy. Have you been? How has your month of November been so far? It's a joy to have you with us on this last Tuesday, November 26, 2024. We are glad, we are grateful, we are delighted to have you with us. You are the reason why we do this. It's important to us that you continue to follow us and feed us back on what you think about what we are doing and your thoughts, your questions, your even disagreements, your dissent. It's important to us because you are the reason why we do this. Well, today we are going to start as we always do by doing a quick recap of our last main session, right? Development National Human Capital Policy. Some of the key things we think it's important for us to note from our last main session as we go on into the new session for today. So the last time we made a couple of points that were important. We talked about the knowledge economy as what we should be developing, or one of the things we should be developing the National Human Capital Policy for, right? What are you developing the National Human Capital Policy for? In knowledge economy is one of the things that, as a nation, you should be developing your human capital policy for. Now, what is a knowledge economy? We said a knowledge economy is an economy that creates, disseminates, and uses knowledge to enhance its growth and development. I repeat, a knowledge economy is an economy that creates, disseminates, and uses knowledge to enhance its growth and development. Don't forget, the knowledge economy does not just create and disseminate, but also uses knowledge to enhance its growth and development. And that's the absorptive capacity that we've been saying we'll be speaking more to, right? Absorptive capacity. And that is the capacity that translates knowledge into economic or the capacity to translate knowledge to economic and social development, right? So it's not just knowledge for the sake of knowledge, but knowledge for economic and social development. Knowledge must translate into wealth. Knowledge must translate into growth. And there are certain things that would help translate knowledge to growth. And we're going to come to those things today, right? We also say that empirical evidence already indicates that countries with a higher incomes are those whose workers are most educated. You will see that this is a point we have been making consistently and unapologetically on this program, the National Human Capital Policy. There is a very strong correlation between the level of development, including higher education, right? Education, beg your pardon, including higher education of people and the capacity of the economy to grow wealth, the capacity of the economy to build wealth, the capacity of the economy to operate at its optimum possibilities, right? It's very important for there to be education, for the people to be educated, and especially higher education, right? It's really important. Now, we also said that, in other words, when we say that empirical evidence already indicates that countries with the higher incomes are those whose workers are most educated, by this, we mean, in other words, that countries whose workers are positioned to create, disseminate, and use knowledge are those who have been seen to be the richest in the world, right? Countries whose workers are positioned to create, disseminate, and use knowledge are those who have been seen to be the richest in the world. Going on from this, we made the point that the National Human Capital Policy is supposed to help your country to operate at the most competitive end of the global value chain, right? Without a National Human Capital Policy that encourages knowledge and that sort of ensures that as much as possible you are a knowledge economy that can create, disseminate, and use knowledge to produce wealth, you might be operating in the global value chain, but at the less competitive end of the global value chain, because with knowledge, you can add value that will enable you command a premium, that will enable you, engage most profitably with whatever it is that you are trading on the world stage, right? Without knowledge, you cannot add value to it. You probably take it in the primary state and you also export it in the primary state. But with knowledge, you can manufacture, you can process, right, your raw materials, and then that way, when you're selling, you can command a premium because you have added significant value to your product. So a national human capital policy is supposed to be created to facilitate and accelerate the implementation of a nation's economic goals. We made that point very important. You're not creating a national human capital policy, or you are not encouraging the development of a knowledge economy only for the creation of knowledge. This is one point I have said we are going to be making more and more on this program. The need for absorptive capacity. They need to take whatever knowledge is being created and translate it into wealth. That's what a national human capital policy is supposed to do. It's supposed to be closely aligned with your economic goals as a nation, right? It's supposed to be developed for the sake of your economic goals. The national economic capital policy is supposed to be created to facilitate and accelerate the implementation of the nation's economic goals. Permit me to add, we also emphasize that this presupposes that there must already have been clearly articulated economic goals so that the national human capital policy can be well aligned to ensure a seamless integration between the human capital policy and your nation's economic goals, right? This is Tolo Mother this beautiful Tuesday on Amoge Radio Communications. Thank you for joining us. We are still sharing highlights from our last minute episode, right? We talked about policy execution of the National Human Capital Policy, including performance requirements, right? The need for it to include performance requirements to enhance execution so that we can bridge the policy performance gap. We use the example of India to highlight how to move from potential to actualization. India was said to have been identified as one of the nations by World Bank report in 2005 as a nation that had the potential for knowledge economy, but they didn't stop there, right? They had to say, okay, we have the potential, beautiful. How do we transit from potential to performance, right? And one of the things we said we're going to look at is why does this journey to policy development, effective policy development, why does it have to begin with an assessment of where you are as a nation as regards areas you want to grow in, or areas you have potential in, or areas that you have opportunities in, right? What is the essence of assessing your nation based on key elements of a national human capital policy that is supposed to drive your economic growth, right? We ask questions like, why is it important to begin with an assessment? Why was it important to also begin with a structure? Because even in developing the assessment, or even in doing the assessment, it's important to create some kind of a framework for the assessment, right? And why do you assess based on this framework, these structural pillars? Again, we use the example of India. Now, this was, I think, a World Bank suggested framework, but it was based on some 4 pillars, right? So why do we assess? And one of the first of these pillars had to do with structure. And we said we need to assess with a structural framework is because when you're dealing with a nation, which is a very macro level assessment, there can be a lot of details. We gave the example of Nigeria with 774 local governments. I checked the number of zip codes in the United States between the last main episode we had, and now I think there are 40,000 plus zip codes. So you have counties that could be as many as 40,000, and governance can be at the local level. Policy development can be very federal in nature, but when it comes to policy implementation, it can be very local in nature. So in order to ensure that execution is done effectively, efficiently, thoroughly, comprehensively, exhaustively, it is important that we get a structure that captures the details, right? So because of what can be the gargantuan nature of details, structure can help us ensure that we are big enough to capture everything. I repeat, because of what can be the gargantuan nature, the massive nature of details at a macro level, we need structure, we need pillars to help us ensure that the framework is big enough to capture everything, to ensure that we can be ordered enough not to miss anything critical. And based on that, we went on to make a critical point that anytime you see order, anytime you see structure, you see order. Anytime you see order, you see optimality, hence the need for pillars. That was one very critical point. Why you need a structure, why you need a framework, why you need pillars, why you need to group this assessment, some kind of a main point, so to say, around which you can build or into which you can assemble the details. So anytime you see structure, you see order. Anytime you see order, you see optimality, hence the need for pillars, right? We said anytime you're trying to do something at a, at a mass level, even at a meso level, which is at medium scale, you need to bring structure. Structure ensures order, and order prevents waste. We repeat, structure ensures order, and order prevents waste. Structure guarantees order, and order leads to optimality. We're excited to have you with us. We're going to be wrapping up the highlights. Again, we look at the reasons for assessment, right? We said immediately after designing the structure for a national human capital policy, the next thing you want to do is an as-is assessment, a current state assessment. Like India did an assessment of itself vis-a-vis the ability to transit to a knowledge economy, as the World Bank report has indicated they had the potential for. Right, it's also important for you as a nation to always commence with a current state assessment as much as possible. You also want to do this in quantifiable terms, right? Using metrics. Whatever it is that you want to translate your broad human capital policy goals into, it is important to break this into a maximum of 5 themes, we said, right? We recommend 3 to 5 themes, but not more than 5 themes. Again, remember it's about structure, it's about pillars. You can put the details into those themes, but there shouldn't be more than 5 themes, right? For each of these policy themes, you must now have metrics that's helping you now to break it down so you can gather the evidence, right, to validate your assessment or even to provide insight that you need, the evidence, the data, the statistics that you need. So you can go from data acquisition, right, or data definition, in fact, to define data that's identifying the metrics, to data acquisition, from data definition to data acquisition. From data acquisition, you can now begin to do the data measurement. From there, you can go to the data analysis, and from there, you can go to data interpretation, and finally to data recommendations, right? From data definition, where you identify the metrics, to data acquisition, from data acquisition to data measurement, from data measurement to data analysis, from data analysis to data interpretation, and then recommendations, right? Finally, in assessing national potential for transition to knowledge economy, I promise to do research before coming back to see if some assessments have been done on Nigeria's potential for a knowledge economy. And this is where I'm going to be spending the rest of today, right? I promise to do a research before this week, before this main episode, to see if some assessment has been done on Nigeria's potential for a knowledge economy. I said if it has been done, I will share my findings, and if it has not been done, I will share my recommendations on how we can carry out such a valid assessment to look at how our potential to be a knowledge economy can be translated into performance. What are the gaps between that knowledge economy potential and the steps that we need to take to transit from potential to performance as a knowledge economy? Without carrying out the research, I could tell from anecdotal evidence that Nigeria is a nation that certainly has the potential to, become a knowledge economy. However, I could easily imagine, again, based on anecdotal evidence, that there are gaps that could be preventing us from translating that potential into performance, from becoming a knowledge economy, as we definitely have the potential to do. In rounding off that day, because I said I'll be speaking a lot to how we can become, our nations, when I say we, how nations can become knowledge economies or can develop human capital policies that increase their absorptive capacity. Remember, that is the capacity to translate knowledge into wealth. I highlighted characteristics of a knowledge economy with absorptive capacity, which is the capacity, don't forget, the absorptive capacity refers to the ability to translate science and technology output into economic and social development. I repeat, absorptive capacity refers to the ability to translate science and technology outputs, right, into economic and social development. So I decided to share characteristics of a knowledge economy with absorptive capacity. And some of the things I shared was from the World Bank's report that said today's most technologically advanced economy are truly knowledge-based. Yes, we've been saying that a lot, but these technologically advanced economies that are knowledge-based also generate new wealth. That's the absorptive capacity. It's not knowledge for knowledge's sake. These technologically advanced economies that are truly knowledge-based now generate new wealth, right? that's like I said, one thing that I would be emphasizing for the rest of this program. And to create this absorptive capacity, it's important to have innovation management systems. Science and technological investment must translate into technological advancement through innovation, right? Innovation that facilitate absorptive capacity. Let me try and explain what I mean by that. So if you intentionally build absorptive capacity into your innovation management system, then the science and technological advancement would translate more easily into new wealth. I need to say that again. If you intentionally build absorptive capacity, right? If you intentionally build innovation management systems that are layered or that are infused with absorptive capacity, that's the capacity to translate science and technological output into economic and social development. If you intentionally, strategically, proactively, from a policy point of view, infuse it into your national human capital policy, ensure that the knowledge we are generating must translate into economic development, then you enhance the chances of generating new wealth. So a true knowledge economy tends to create millions of jobs in an array of disciplines that have emerged overnight, right? As you're generating new knowledge, you are not just generating new wealth, but you're also generating new job opportunities, and they tend to be many, right? A true knowledge economy tends to create millions of jobs in an array of disciplines that have emerged overnight. In other words, new knowledge becomes new wealth that creates new jobs. Take note of that. That is a true knowledge economy. You are generating new knowledge. That new knowledge is translating into new wealth, and that new wealth is also creating many new job opportunities, right? And finally, we talked about developing and implementing innovation management systems as part of national human capital policy for absorptive capacity. We said this is what is required to help nations translate the knowledge generated into new wealth, right? And it's important for this to happen. One, there must be economic goals for the knowledge outputs. For those outputs to translate into outcomes and eventually impact, there must be intentional economic goals. And to be honest with you, as we talk about the details of what I have found from my research into Nigeria, I must also say that our next episode, I want to begin to look at the economic aspect of creating, that absorptive capacity, because absorptive capacity is now about translating new knowledge into economic development. So there is definitely an economic aspect to this, and we might be inviting an economist over to discuss that with us. Right. So developing and implementing innovation management systems as part of human capital policies for absorptive capacity begins with having clear economic goals for those knowledge outputs. Why are we creating knowledge? What kind of economic goals, what economic targets, economic outcomes do we want to have? Right. So we are garnering new knowledge, but those new knowledge must, help us to generate new wealth, to ensure that our innovation is optimized, right? And I remember challenging us, for instance, as in Nigeria, we can raise the next Zuckerberg. I'm not talking about from a knowledge point of view. We already have a lot of intelligent Nigerians doing great things. I was reading recently about a Nigerian that owns about 6 airports in the world, including Gatwick Airport. But that Gatwick Airport is not in Nigeria. So it's not about raising great Nigerians now, but raising a great Nigeria. You are focused on India, are focused on Portugal in previous episodes, but this particular episode is going to be about Nigeria. How do we translate this knowledge, this new knowledge, into new wealth for new job opportunities to enhance Nigeria's economic development? Right, very important. I said I would like the next Microsoft to come from Nigeria. Like today, Microsoft is valued at billions of dollars. Ditto for organizations like I think Tesla is probably close to $1 trillion. Microsoft, Facebook, some of these companies have even bordered on about $1 trillion now. I said I would like the next Microsoft to come from Nigeria, not from an intellectual capacity, not the knowledge part, but from the absorptive capacity part. So we already have the intellectual capacity, but what we lack is a national human capital policy with deliberate innovation segment that is channeled to ensure that will become a new knowledge economy where the knowledge is translating into technological advancement, which is further funneled into new wealth. Wow. I hope this has not sounded like a lot. If it has, my apologies, but it is very necessary. Again, I'm going to repeat that. Again, zooming in on Nigeria. What we lack is a national human capital policy with a deliberate innovation segment that is channeled to ensure that we become a true knowledge economy where the knowledge is translating into technological advancement, which is further funneled, which is further, deliberately channeled into new wealth. I challenge us by reminding us that the greatest resources are human minds. They are just yet to be optimized. There's a lot of capacity that we will gain as nations generally when we have human capital policies that encourage higher education, but we must also ensure that the knowledge gained therefrom is translating into knowledge outputs and into innovation that generates new wealth and millions of new jobs in an array of disciplines. Wow. That looked like a long summary, but it is very, very important. Like I said, we need to keep reminding ourselves of these things. There are points that we need to keep repeating, especially things like absorptive capacity. They need to translate knowledge into new wealth. And then today, like I said, we are going to go on from there to begin to focus on Nigeria. We may need more than one episode to do that, but we are going to begin to focus on Nigeria. Once again, thank you for being here with us. My name is Tolu Omodara. This is Amoge Federal Communications. The program is developing a national human capital policy, and we are going to go on to discuss some of the findings. Remember, from my research, like I said, I promised to look to see if such an assessment had been done, like the one that was done on India's capacity to transit to a knowledge economy. I wanted to find out if such had been done on Nigeria. If such had not been done, I promised to share my thoughts on how we could do that. And well, of course, let's start with what is. It's always important to begin with what exists already in the literature. In other words, we are not going to stop there. I'm still going to share my thoughts in addition to what I found in the research, but it is important to look at the assessment that has already been done, to acknowledge it, to see what can be taken from it, what is current, what may need to be updated, and to proceed from that into making our recommendations on what can be added or what can even be, or what may need to even be changed. But if there is no need for anything to be changed, then we'll speak to what can be added to enhance what is on ground, or what can be done to update it. This is still Tolu Omodara and Amoge Federal Communications. So what did we find? Well, we actually found that there had been a product, right? Something had been created that more or less like a book. I think it is a book called Knowledge, Productivity and Innovation in Nigeria, Creating a New Economy. I repeat, Knowledge, Productivity and Innovation in Nigeria, Creating a New Economy. It's a World Bank publication. I think that's the better word for it. It's a World Bank publication, and it was published in 2010. Please take note, 2010. So some of the information there may need to be updated. I don't know if there's an updated version, but this is what I found. Knowledge, you can read it up. It's a very interesting one. It's very illuminating. I've been consuming a lot of information from it, and I'm not done yet, but I'm going to share some of the things I've seen. Again, the title of this publication is Knowledge, Productivity and Innovation in Nigeria, Creating a New Economy. Even from the title, you can see that the publication, this World Bank publication, is making a case for Nigeria to create a new economy, right? The book had a couple of chapters. I think it has 2 parts, if I'm not wrong. Yes, the book has 2 parts, and it begins with an overview, and in the overview, it lays the case or makes the case on why we must have knowledge for development. Very, very, very important. Like I've been saying, take note, I hadn't read this book until I decided to do the research to see if anything had been shared on Nigeria's potential, because I believed it should have been shared on Nigeria's potential for transiting to a knowledge economy, because we clearly have that potential. And then I saw that it had been done as far back as 2010, right? Again, for those who want to check it up, the title is Knowledge, Productivity and Innovation in Nigeria, Creating a New Economy. The 2 main authors of this publication are, I hope I'm pronouncing their names well, Ismail Radian and Gulia Pellegrini, right? The 2010 World Bank publication. So it began with an overview that made the case for why we must do knowledge for development. The 21st century economy has to be a knowledge-driven economy. There's no other way about it. Very, very important, right? And if you doubt me, just look at where we have the biggest, like we've said earlier, the richest economies today are those that are knowledge economies. It's as basic as that, right? So having made the case, the overview also talked about charting a way forward. Now, part one focused on Nigeria, knowledge, productivity, and innovation. And chapter one of part one says, why is knowledge so important for a new Nigerian economy? Remember again, the title of the book or publication is Knowledge, Productivity, and Innovation in Nigeria. I coined it as KPI. The new key performance indicators could be knowledge, productivity, and innovation. I only wondered whether it should be KPI or KEEP, whether it should be knowledge, innovation, and productivity, or knowledge, productivity, and innovation. For now, we keep it as KPI, knowledge, productivity, and innovation in Nigeria, creating a new economy, right? So the first part is looking at knowledge, productivity, and innovation broadly, KPI. The first chapter of the first part talks about why is knowledge so important for a new Nigerian economy, right? It says, what is a knowledge economy? What does that imply for Nigeria? What are the specific implications for Nigeria? In other words, what are the gaps, right? What does Nigeria need to do to become that knowledge economy, right? And the third part of that first chapter is what interested me the most. It says, assessing Nigeria's opportunities and challenges as a knowledge-oriented economy, because that's the heart of the matter. Like we looked at India, they did not just say, oh, we have a potential to be a knowledge economy. They now did an assessment, a current state assessment, like I said in the review of the last main episode. They looked at a current state assessment of where they were based on some 4 key points, based on some 4 pillars. Where were they vis-a-vis their possibilities, right? What was the gaps, or where were the gaps between their possibilities and their potential? And that also was done in this 2010 publication for Nigeria. Why is knowledge so important for a new Nigerian economy is the title of the first chapter. It begins by defining what a knowledge economy is, then went on to specify what that implies for Nigeria. And the third part, like I said, is the part that excited me the most, assessing Nigeria's opportunities and challenges as a knowledge-oriented economy. The second chapter says advancing Nigeria's education system. I've told you again and again on this program, when you are trying to develop a national human capital policy, you must talk education. There's no way around it, right? Advancing Nigeria's education system is a key part of ensuring Nigeria translates or transits into a knowledge economy, right? Under advancing Nigerian education system, there were segments like developing skilled human resources. He assessed Nigeria's education system. I'll share some of those findings with you. We talked about the need to improve access, quality, and funding to ensure that we have the kind of education system that can help us transit and optimize our potential as a national knowledge economy. He said Nigeria needs to improve access, quality, and funding of our education system, right? And in summary, he also shared some highlights. The publication also shared highlights of suggestions on improving Nigerian education system, right? Now, the third one is very, very important for the absorptive capacity. That's why I said it may be time to invite an economist over to share thoughts on this absorptive capacity. You should remember absorptive capacity. You've heard me say it again and again deliberately. You must be knowing it by now. Absorptive capacity refers to the ability to translate the knowledge output into social and economic development. Very, very important. We are not just, creating knowledge for the sake of creating knowledge. A national human capital policy must be connected very strongly to economic goals. A national human capital policy must be encouraging us to translate all that we have learned, the insights, the findings, the research output must be translated into economic outcomes, right? So absorptive capacity refers to the ability to translate science and technology output into economic and social development. Never forget that. And that was why the third chapter really interested me. Chapter 3 of this World Bank publication on Nigeria's knowledge economic potential is titled Improving Nigeria's Business Environment. If we do not improve that business environment, that question or that challenge I threw, that I would like to see Nigeria raise the next or create the next Microsoft, that challenge may not be well taken until we improve Nigeria's business environment, because when it comes to translating knowledge output into economic outcomes, the right business environment must be created. I repeat, when it comes to or for knowledge output to be translated into economic outcomes, the right business environment must exist in your nation. These are hard facts. These are truths. Nigeria must look at this. Remember, we've looked at Portugal, we've looked at India. Today, we are looking at Nigeria. Nigeria, like India, has also been, stated to have a knowledge economy potential. The World Bank report on India was done on India's potential for knowledge economy. I think it was done in 2005. The publication on Nigeria that I reviewed, this World Bank publication on Nigeria's knowledge economy potential, was published in 2010, right? And chapter 3, like I said, is on improving Nigeria's business environment, because without this, we may produce all the knowledge outputs that are possible, but they are not likely to translate into economic development in the absence of the right business environment. As at 2010, this report was talking about the high cost of doing business in Nigeria. Unfortunately, I think it has grown even higher. This report looked at major constraints to business in Nigeria, right? And the report also zoomed in on Nigeria's business environment for the knowledge economy. In other words, in my interpretation of this, what kind of business environment can help Nigeria ensure that the knowledge that is being generated, first of all, that the right knowledge is being generated, that has been captured by the second chapter, which would do a lot with Nigeria's education system. But for this knowledge outputs to be translated into optimum economic development, then Nigeria's business environment must be improved, right? So this third chapter, improving Nigeria's business environment, also looked at Nigeria's business environment for the knowledge economy, the right business environment that Nigeria needs to create for the knowledge economy to thrive, right? And finally, the fourth and fifth chapters were on Nigeria's information infrastructure. If you remember, when we're looking at India, I think the third pillar of India's assessment was on, more or less packaging that knowledge outputs, right? And I remember saying that you must make the output as attractive as possible. I gave the example of Google. I said Google is definitely not the only search engine, even though right now their monopoly is being challenged in courts in the United States. The truth is that as of today, they have made their information, all that they are producing, as attractive and accessible as possible, and that helps to enhance how will I put it now? That helps to ensure that you enhance your absorptive capacity. That's the capacity to translate knowledge into wealth, right? There were 4 pillars for that assessment in India. They looked at 4 critical pillars of a knowledge economy. The first was strengthening the economic and institutional system, developing educated and skilled workers, creating an efficient innovation system, and of course, building a dynamic information infrastructure. So that was for India. For Nigeria, they also looked at expanding Nigeria's information infrastructure, and they talked about information infrastructure. This report talked about information infrastructure as being key to productivity and economic growth. Believe me, if this was so in 2010, it is even more so 14 years down the line. You know that because I guess you are probably listening to me on the phone or listening to me on your system, on the laptop, all of which is undergirded by the information infrastructure. Information infrastructure is very key to productivity and economic growth. So this report benchmarks Nigeria's information infrastructure and also made some recommendations. And finally, the 5th chapter, after the 4th one on expanding Nigeria's information infrastructure, the 5th chapter of this first part was titled Creating an Innovation Culture. Very important. I'm not going to focus a lot on that today, but let me give you the highlights. We talked about what an innovation system is. We talked about benchmarking Nigeria's innovation system. I want to remind you that in previous episodes, we talked about the need to create while looking at India, the need to create an efficient innovation system, right? Because an innovation management system, and I referenced the program we have done on Amogate before, an innovation management system is not just about creativity. Creativity is more or less at the either the micro or meso level, right? So when you have creativity, it's still like creating knowledge output. But when you have a knowledge or innovation management system, beg your pardon, you are now creating a process, a whole system that can ensure that those creative outputs are being translated into maximum wealth at the national level. That you definitely need an innovation management system for, very important, as they looked at India for. We also have to look at Nigeria and say, how efficient is our innovation management system? What are we doing with it? There's so much creativity happening in Nigeria. You know it, in sports, in entertainment, in science. A lot of creativity is coming out from Nigeria, but is it being translated into maximum economic gains for Nigeria at the macro level? I saw a webinar that will be holding sometime this week. It is I think it's being facilitated by an institution called the Atlantic Council. It's an international institution, but it's the African Center for of the Atlantic Council, and the title is Protecting Intellectual Property Rights for African Creatives. If you're interested, you can check it out. Protecting Intellectual Property Rights for African Creatives. We'll be holding the webinar, will be holding on Thursday, December 5 at 2 p.m. Right? You'll be holding at the US Capitol Visitor Center, but I think you can join in virtually. Now, this is the innovation management system that Africa lacks, not just Nigeria. According to the United Nations, the creative sector will generate $20 billion, not M, $20 billion in revenue per year towards Africa's economy. But is Africa going to be maximizing this? Does Africa have the absorptive capacity to ensure that they get the most, that Africa gets the most of this creativity that will be flowing out of Nigeria, or of Africa, Nigeria inclusive? Without that innovation management system, all our creativity, the maximum economic benefits of it may be actually going out of Africa, unfortunately. So we do not just need creativity, but we also need innovation management systems as clear drivers of economic growth and optimal youth creation. Very, very important. And this is why what is called IPR, intellectual property rights, is very, very important, right? If we don't understand how to manage intellectual property rights for all the creativity, we may have a lot of creativity, but it may not translate into maximum or optimal economic development because we don't have efficient innovation management system. Remember, I've told you we are going to be focusing on absorptive capacity a lot now. We've talked about knowledge outputs in previous episodes. Now we are going to be focused on the absorptive capacity. How do we ensure that the knowledge we are creating in science and technology, in entertainment, in sports, and so many other areas in which we're already producing knowledge outputs, how do we ensure that these knowledge outputs are translating into maximum and optimum economic and social development? That is the reason why we need an efficient innovation management system. So I've talked about the 5 main chapters under part 1. I will talk about the other chapters under part 2. There are only 2 parts. I'll talk about those ones next week. It's basically a comparison of Nigeria with a couple of other nations that are other that are other knowledge economies. So part 2 is case studies. What can Nigeria learn from these other countries? I'm going to talk about that next week, right, by God's grace. But for this week, just know that part 1 looked at knowledge, productivity, and innovation, and some of those things I've shared with you. For the sake of time, we'll be wrapping up soon. Next week, I'll go into more lessons. I just want you to know for now that this assessment has been done on Nigeria. There are areas in which it can be updated, but there are some things to note already, right? One of the things to note from this report that I like, he said Nigeria needs to make this transition to a new economy based on knowledge, productivity, and innovation. Again, take note, KPI is very, very important. Don't forget that Nigeria makes the transition to a new economy based on knowledge, productivity, and innovation that will enable it to be competitive. Very, very important, right? The report also said that one of the things they also said that I think we also need to take note of, it said countries such as the Republic of Korea, India, and the United States of America that can harness the power of new technologies, nurture a cadre of knowledge workers that can push the productivity and innovation frontiers. Unfortunately, others that fail to do so remain in poverty, unfortunately. As much as my colleague, Dr. Tisola Wushono, will give you the poverty ratio of Nigeria, the poverty index, and according to this report on Nigeria's knowledge, productivity, and innovation capacity, the report says that, look, countries such as Republic of Korea, India, and the United States that can harness the power of new technologies will nurture a cadre of knowledge workers intentionally. So we must put it into our national human capitalist policy in Nigeria that we want to nurture a cadre of knowledge workers. They will nurture this cadre of knowledge workers that can push the productivity and innovation frontiers. Remember, not just the creativity, I just made that difference, but also the innovation management system that will ensure that we maximize economic benefits or economic returns from all the knowledge output and creativity that we are demonstrating, right? Um, I'll say one more thing for the sake of time and I'll stop there. The report said our world is rapidly changing, and those who will be able to acquire, adapt, and utilize new ideas and innovation, regardless of whoever has invented them, will create tremendous wealth in the process. This was interesting to me because, in other words, this part is saying that it may not necessarily be those who create the knowledge output that would create tremendous wealth from them, but those who are able to acquire, adapt, and utilize them. Remember, I keep saying the knowledge economy is the one that can create, disseminate, and use knowledge and utilize knowledge, optimally. That's why we have to talk about this absorptive capacity a little bit more, right? It's very, 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 very important. Well, sadly, for the sake of time, I close on one of the questions. I close with one of the questions asked in the report. It says, how can Nigeria prepare for this knowledge economy century? What areas must its leaders focus on to achieve this vision of a new Nigerian economy? And the report set out to answer these questions like we have been seeking to answer. This has been very, very fulfilling for me, very interesting, very deep for me. This is my heartbeat. How do we translate all of the knowledge outputs that Nigerians, not Nigeria, but Nigerians so far has been known for, right? How do we now translate it into optimum economic benefit that Nigeria, not just Nigerians now, but the nation of Nigeria will be known for? In other words, Nigerians, the people of Nigeria, have been known to be great, highly respected, doing tremendously well. But the nation of Nigeria, time has come for the nation of Nigeria to also be great, not just in potential, not just in name, but also in economic possibilities that have translated into realities. It's on this note that I say goodbye. Sadly, for the sake of time today, I'll be back same time, same station next week to talk more about this knowledge and productivity potential of Nigeria and the absorptive capacity we need to maximize it into optimal economic benefits that will not just take us out of poverty, but would also make us one of the richest countries in the world, as we have seen other knowledge economies become. Thank you very much for doing this with us. My name is Tolu Omadara. This is Amalgate Radio Communications. This has been developing a national human capital policy. There'll be other great programs. Remember, we do this Monday through Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. West African time. We look forward to hearing back from you. You can send us your feedback on contact@theamalgate.org. We look forward to hearing back from you. You are the reason why we do this. Also, remember, we are available to meet your knowledge needs, your consulting needs. We can help you put an infrastructure in place, frameworks in place to assess your knowledge, economy possibilities. We can also work with you as organizations, as institutions. We can work with you as development agencies that are helping to conduct such assessments in nations. This is our forte, this is our turf. We've worked with the German Development Agency. We've worked with organizations in the nation of Ethiopia. We've worked with the Economic Commission of West African States. That's an intranational body, or an intracontinental body, beg your pardon, and an a body made up of different nations in West Africa. We've worked with different organizations at several levels. This is our forte, this is our strength, and it's also our passion. We look forward to engaging with you, collaborating with you. You can reach us on contact@theamogi.org. You can find us on all our social media handles: Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, at Amogate. Our website is www.theamogate.org. We look forward to hearing from you. We look forward to collaborating with you. We look forward to partnering with you. And I personally look forward to being back same time, same station next week to delve further into how Nigeria's knowledge output can be translated into optimum economic outcomes through intensified and strengthened absorptive capacity. Thank you so much. I'll be back same time, same station next week. Until then, happy Thanksgiving to our friends in the United States. We'll be having Thanksgiving this Thursday, November 28th. Thank you so much. See you same time, same station next week. And remember, don't just think knowledge output, but also think economic outcomes through absorptive capacity. Have a good one. Bye.